everyone, and welcome to our Humans of AI podcast. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Javier de la Rosa, Head of Language Models at the AI Lab of the National Library of Norway. The National Library of Norway stands at the forefront of digital transformation, leveraging AI to revolutionize its operations, services, and user experiences. Let's hear what that means in practice. Javier, let's start with the spark, as we call it. What we noticed is that Norway is really at the forefront of what's happening in AI in the GLAM sector. And not only for Norway itself, but you're very active also in initiatives like AI for LAM, which are trying to look at the GLAM sector and how AI can enhance it and make it better. Why do you think that AI offers so many opportunities for the GLAM sector, and how do you see it rolling out at the moment?
In the specific case of Norway, we have to date back almost 20 years. That's when the directors at the time decided to create this digitization program. So all the cultural heritage written or published in Norwegian should be preserved. We started mass digitization then, and 20 years later, we discovered that it was actually going to be pretty useful for AI models, for example. So it was a jump of faith. It took a lot of convincing. We were a pretty small library back then, but after all of these years of digitization, the results are now finally paying off, not only because we make our content publicly accessible to every Norwegian citizen, but also because now we can actually leverage all of that content digitized to improve existing language models and other AI systems that people are using.
What I like in your answer is the leap of faith aspect. And I think that's maybe a good message to all of your colleagues in other countries and to policymakers, is to maybe have a leap of faith and encourage and enable digitization more. Having had that leap of faith and having been at the forefront of digitization, how do you assess the impact? And what is AI enabling in Norway or beyond in your cross border ventures? How is it making a difference in areas like healthcare, public policy, sustainable development? Also, I think, is there anything surprising or unexpected about the way your technology?
It's impacting every aspect of life, at least in Norway. We are a small country, and usually we are not the first target when technology gets developed. So after this digitization project was started more than 20 years ago, around 5 years ago, the directors of the library decided that it was a good idea to take a deeper look at everything that we produced. That's how they started the artificial intelligence lab, with the goal of just experimenting, trying and failing, try to innovate, see what can be done. One of the first projects we developed was called Macken, which is Norwegian for like the matching other. And the idea was that given an arbitrary book, you could get another book recommended to you based not on metadata, but on the actual content. We did the same. We expanded it to images, and then the whole world of LLMs came to be. And all of this technology was developed in-house. So when we started experimenting with LLMs, we discovered that the Norwegian aspects of it were not really shining. We have many different dialects. It's hard for language models to actually accommodate all the dialects. Our views were not embedded in this kind of system, so we thought that it could be a good idea to actually develop and start creating our own language models. We started doing that, and then we released several models. We released like bird-based models. We released the first GPT Norwegian model based on GPT-J, which is also open source, but Eluther AI, which an institution releasing, doing open research. We also release MB Whisper, which is for automatic speech recognition. And all of these systems are actually having an impact. We have, for example, the students coming for master's degrees trying to analyze the gender bias encoded in these models. We had police department or hospitals using our ASR technology to do transcriptions of the interviews. And we also had newspapers using our LLMs trying to generate automatically titles or ingress text for these news articles. So the impact is actually quite high, but also are the expectations now.
Well, that's good having high expectations. Now, looking at the path you've had to follow, I imagine there must have been challenges because you talked about a leap of faith, so that kind of indicates it. What were the biggest challenges you faced in developing and rolling out these AI solutions? Did you find that the policies and regulations in Norway, as an EEA country that's not in the EU but often closely aligned with it, did you find those policies and regulations were close enough to support your work? And if you could change something, are there areas where you felt things were unnecessarily complicated and could be simplified to make it easier to do your job advanced?
Think that in Norway we are in a very privileged position because we have the Legal Deposit Act, which by law is not only we are not only allowed to record Norwegian history, but it's also our duty. We have to preserve our culture. And the way to do that is by actually digitizing everything. I mean, not only books and newspapers, but everything, media, music, radio, podcast, you name it, everything needs to be digitized. We also have the legal rights to create artifacts for research based on this material. There are several legal frameworks around this. One of them is the technology for MOL, which allows us to do research for language technology purposes. The problem is that a lot of these agreements we had in place were designed and written before LLMs came into the picture. So we have to battle with that. For example, talking to different copyright holders, talking to the different parties, because the kind of technology, language technology we are developing now is slightly different than the one they had access to when they signed the agreements. So when generative AI actually, it was actually around ChatGPT, that was like the aha moment for a lot of layman people in the world when they saw the actual use of AI. They thought, okay, maybe we need to rethink all of these agreements, right? And it was the case for us that we have to redo part of our work. For example, we are used to release open data sets based on our laws. We are used to release open models based on our laws, and then we have to withdraw some of these releases because they were withdrawing from the agreements based on generative AI. So it's not it was the fact that these models can actually now generate text or images or other kind of media that was making them a bit scared because of their way of living. They felt threatened in a way. So we have to rethink everything. And of course, we have to honor every single agreement. We have to talk to them first and not after. So in our case, it's better to ask for permission than for forgiveness.
Now, let's look at the future because obviously this area of AI is moving really fast and lots of changes are happening day by day. Sometimes they're real changes, sometimes they're hype, but things are happening, things are moving. How do you see your plans evolving in Norway for the next 5 years? Looking ahead, since you're so advanced and have a strong understanding of how AI can drive positive outcomes in Norway, what advice would you give to other public interest?
Well, 5 years, that's a longer roadmap than my boss asked me to to do. But in my case, we started fairly small, a team of 2, 3 people, doing a lot of experiments, trying to operationalize our digital collections, and then things grew. We hired more people. We put together models that people were actually using, other organizations, public bodies, everyone. And then we made this study. trying to assess whether using copyrighted material was actually beneficial for the performance of LLMs. And it sparked a conversation with copyright holders. And the conclusion of that uh, phase of study and later negotiation is that now there are budget lines in the national budget to actually pay right holders for the use of their content for training in this kind of language model artifacts. But we also part of the conclusion of this is that now the Norwegian government sees the National Library as a key actor in the AI ecosystem in Norway. So they have actually funded a new section, a new unit within the National Library, specifically tasked with the development of language models for Norwegian society. So there is now an expectation that we are the key actors releasing these models for the public good. In that sense, we are starting with a series of language models that are not like these massive behemoths that you can find in the, for example, Chinese or American big labs. This is more tailored to consumer products that people can actually download and use in their devices. So we put a lot of emphasis in privacy. So not everyone wants to send their data to OpenAI or Qwen3 or DeepSeek. In our case, we have a lot of public entities working with our models, so privacy is one of the key factors they look for. And we're trying to make models that everyone can use, even in their own regular work laptops. That's one of the things. The other big aspect is going beyond the text modality. We want to venture into speech, both recognition, but also synthetic voices production, which is very complicated because we're a small country, only 7 million people. So packaging and selling a voice is something that Norwegians have some concerns. It's not, they usually don't like for the living voices to be put out there. For example, we talk with a Norwegian broadcast company in Norway, and there are different policies about what kind of voices they can use. For example, it would not be ethical to use the voice of a living journalist, right? Because that would threaten his way of living. So there is a lot of concerns about the way Norwegians actually live and behave in the world when we make a roadmap for the future. But definitely going into speech mode and also visual mode is something we have in the works as well.
So we're at the closing already. If you had one key message you want to give to policymakers and the public.
I think that policymakers need to fully understand what's going on, and we need to still have a competitive advantage against other players in the field. We need to be able to encode our own model values, our own idiosyncrasies in the system we build. We're not American, we're not Chinese, we have our own different values. And we also are multicultural in a sense in Europe. So I can understand from the point of view of policymakers how we need to protect all the material we create, but if the restrictions are too many, then it becomes really impossible for small actors to contribute to this landscape of AI and making Europe visible in that. Uh, there are some specific details about, for example, the number of flops models can have to be considered high risk in the EU, in the European Union AI Act. There is a proposal now, I think, for defining like high risk scenarios and things like that. Not all of those specific cases might play well with the different institutions. For example, a national library might have already different provisions. It's allowed to train, it's allowed to release. So I think that we need a lot more understanding between the different duties that each organization already has in place, what they can do and what they want to do as well. Because we as an institution, we want to release models that are openly available for the public, but also useful for them. So if in every step in the library we have to fight with all the copyright holders, with all the different institutions, organizations, we need to create new licenses, we need to create new legal frameworks, then the actual work gets diluted. And by the time we are able to release, the time window has passed. And we don't want to be in that situation, I think.
Thank you, Javier. That's a very concrete closing, and I hope that policy